Inkpaduta didn't knock politely at Spirit Lake. In 1857, his Sioux band carved a brutal warning across Iowa's frontier. Settlers expected trade. They got annihilation. The government thought treaties caged the Sioux. Big mistake. This massacre wasn't just vengeance, it was a preview of 1862's Inferno. Picture a viral feud, except the algorithm rewards scalps, not likes. Long before treaties turned promises into punchlines, the upper Mississippi was the playground for the Dakota tribes, or Sioux as the French mangled that name in a clumsy twist. They ruled from St. Anthony's Thundering Falls down to Iowa's edges, along the Mississippi River and the St. Peters, now Minnesota, where prairies rolled without mercy and forests concealed ambushes. In 1680, Louis Hennepin, French explorer, arrived by canoe, named those falls after his patron saint, and faced capture by the Sioux. Months passed in captivity, yet he and his companions walked free, no ransom extracted, a gesture that revealed the warriors' calculated indifference to fleeting outsiders. By 1766, British officer Jonathan Carver entered the fray, embedding himself for 3 years among tribes entangled in ceaseless strife with the northern Chippewa, ancient adversaries exchanging raids that carved scars across generations. The Sioux formed a warlike powerhouse, their domain a no man's land buffer, where survival hinged on enduring grudges that outlasted seasons. Carver observed and then manipulated, forging a tenuous peace between Sioux and Chippewa that secured him the notorious Carver Grant. In a cave near modern St. Paul, 2 chiefs allocated a vast territory, spanning from the falls to Lake Pepin, then east 100 miles, north 120, and back west, a concession tied to bonds of mediation and lasting amity. Carver perished without gain, and his descendants petitioned Congress, presenting a 1821 endorsement from Lake Traverse, inked by 4 Sioux, including Petit Corbeau, father to the eventual 1862 instigator Little Crow. Congress rejected the claim as unsubstantiated, denying any inheritance. This dismissal exposed the contradiction. These Sioux were the identical groups handling subsequent pacts at Mendota and Traverse des Sioux, affirming their long-standing territorial grip despite bureaucratic dismissals. The episode underscored a recurring disconnect, with solemn accords reduced to dismissed formalities, echoing assertions that the land remained unaltered by foreign assertions. The Sioux structure divided into bands, akin to rival factions within a unified realm, each marked by distinct autonomy and contested holdings. Sioux stemmed from French abbreviation of their ancestral term's closing syllable, a curt designation carrying undertones of contempt from intruders. Minnesota housed 4 primary divisions: the Med-de-Wakanton, Spirit Lake inhabitants, named for sacred mill locks and commanded by Little Crow, who would one day till soil before resuming conflict; the Wapakut, leaf shooters, a lesser contingent asserting control over the Cannon and Upper Blue Earth rivers under leaders like Red Leg; the Wahpeton, leaf residents, nestled in wooded enclaves near Little Rapids, 45 miles from the Minnesota River's outlet; and the Sisseton, marsh occupants, extending from Traverse des Sioux to Little Rock, staking Swan Lake territories. Hereditary chiefs oversaw these groups, fragmented into subunits like corporate offshoots, encompassing roughly 6,200 individuals poised for annuity distributions that ignited disputes. Their influence stretched westward into untamed regions, paralleling the roving Yanktons and Yanktones, cutheads drifting unbound by fixed allocations beyond the rivers. These outliers roamed freely, occasionally converging with eastern relatives for pursuits or clashes, muddying boundaries etched by agreements. The cutheads audaciously demanded shares in Traverse des Sioux concessions without endorsement, a bold precursor to escalating complaints. Divisions crystallized geographically. Upper Sioux, Wahpeton, and Sisseton, positioned farther along the river's headwaters. Lower counterparts, Madawakanton and Wapakute, nearer the confluence. Such layouts fostered internal discord, where one faction's accord tainted another's expectations, breeding resentment over uneven shares. Initial European encounters eroded independence gradually, like persistent erosion wearing down foundations. Hennepin's expedition drew French traders into Sioux routines, exchanging trinkets for hides and forging marital ties that blurred distinctions. Carver's period witnessed British incursions after colonial wars, with Sioux aligning against Americans in the Revolution in 1812, demonstrating strategic adaptability. Before 1815, no payments lured compliance. Interactions remained unrefined, probing, yielding fragile ceasefires. Chippewa hostilities persisted indefinitely, incursions rhythmic like ingrained rituals. Sioux prowess rested on population and aggression, though fissures emerged. Assassinations, such as Inkpaduta's slaying of a Wapakut chief, exiled relatives into outlawry, spawning the band destined for Spirit Lake's infamy. Tensions accumulated unnoticed, building toward inevitable rupture. This period portrayed the Sioux as territorial overlords, defying later narratives of inevitable decline. They engaged newcomers with measured wariness, offering land in reciprocal gestures that foreigners distorted into permanent transfers. Carver's failed bequest illuminated cultural rifts. Sioux covenants held sanctity, while congressional scrutiny treated them as mere documents. As the century advanced, Sioux sovereignty endured, territories abundant with quarry, alliances resilient amid quarrels. Expansionist pressures gathered, covetous of terrain and authority, compelling surrenders. The 1857 Spirit Lake carnage drew from these origins, in early dealings where alliances concealed impending disloyalty, fostering disputes that resonated across eras. The treaties started rolling in like unwanted guests at a wake, each one chipping away at Sioux sovereignty with the subtlety of a blunt axe. By 1815, the War of 1812 had wrapped up, leaving the United States eyeing native alliances with suspicion. The Sioux, having sided with the British, found themselves at Portage des Sioux on the 19th of July, signing the first formal friendship pact. It wasn't about land grabs yet, just a handshake to bury old hatchets, ensuring peace on the frontier where rivers met and ambitions clashed. This agreement set a tone of wary coexistence, but it hinted at the government's playbook. Secure loyalty first, then squeeze for concessions. No payments dangled as incentives, only the implied threat of force if relations soured, a diplomatic dance where one side held all the guns. Fast forward to 1816, and the pattern sharpened at St. Louis on the 1st of June. 8 Sioux bands confirmed prior land cessions made to Britain, France, or Spain, now handed over to the expanding American empire. These weren't fresh surrenders, but rubber stamps on old deals, territories acquired through European conquests that the U.S. inherited like second-hand luggage. Again, no annuities sweetened the pot, as the government framed it as mere validation, not compensation. The Sioux chiefs inked the document, perhaps seeing it as a formality to keep traders flowing and conflicts at bay. But it etched a precedent. Their lands could be bartered away without them at the table, a quiet erosion that built resentment like sediment in a riverbed. Over time, this would flood into outright fury, as promises piled up without delivery. The real game-changer hit in 1830 at Prairie du Chien on the 15th of July, where 4 major Sioux bands, Metawakanton, Wahpeton, Wapakute, and Sisseton, plus others, relinquished claims to a 20-mile strip in present-day Iowa from the Mississippi east to the Des Moines west. In exchange, gifts and $3,000 annually for a decade, plus a blacksmith's residence and education funds. This marked the first time land swapped for yearly payouts, shifting from friendship pacts to economic binds. The Sioux viewed it as a trade for resources they could use, but the government saw opportunity: open prairies for settlers, annuities as leashes to control movement. It was the start of dependency, where buffalo hunts gave way to waiting lines at agencies, a system designed to civilize through scarcity. Ironically, these funds often vanished into trader pockets or bureaucratic black holes, leaving the bands hungrier than before. By 1837, the Washington Treaty escalated the stakes, with the Mdewakanton ceding all lands east of the Mississippi. This handover unlocked vast tracts in modern Wisconsin and eastern Minnesota for American expansion, turning trading posts into booming settlements overnight. Substantial annuities followed, fueling a rush of pioneers who dotted the landscape with farms and forts. The Sioux, pushed westward, watched their eastern hunting grounds vanish under plows, a bitter pill swallowed under duress. Chiefs signed amid pressures from agents promising prosperity, but reality delivered displacement and disease. This pact wasn't just about dirt, it formalized a divide, where rivers became borders and old freedoms curdled into reservations. The government's generosity masked a strategy of containment, ensuring natives stayed out of the way while wagons rolled in. These early treaties, from 1815 to 1837, wove a web of obligations that tangled the Sioux in American bureaucracy. What began as peace gestures morphed into land heists, each signature a step toward confinement. Annuities promised stability but bred corruption, with funds siphoned by intermediaries who profited from native need. The irony stung. A nation of warriors, once roaming vast prairies, now pinned to maps drawn by strangers. As settlements sprouted like weeds, tensions simmered, foreshadowing explosions like Spirit Lake. The Sioux adapted, trading pelts for payments, but the deal's fine print ensured one side always lost ground, literally and figuratively, setting the stage for betrayals that would echo through the decades. By 1849, the winds of expansion had whipped Minnesota into shape as a U.S. territory, a patchwork of prairies and rivers ripe for the picking, where native claims clashed with settler dreams in a game nobody won cleanly. Congress formalized the setup that year, dubbing it Minnesota Territory, and tapped Alexander Ramsey from Pennsylvania as its first governor, doubling him as Superintendent of Indian Affairs, a role that blended diplomacy with the sharp edge of oversight. Population boomed almost overnight, pioneers spilling from steamboats onto lands still humming with Sioux hunts and ceremonies. This rapid influx turned friendly nods into urgent negotiations, as whites encroached on native grounds, sparking frictions that treaties alone could douse, or so the government hoped. Ramsey's dual hat meant every handshake carried the weight of policy, pushing for deals that cleared paths for farms while promising the Sioux a sliver of stability, though history would mock that bargain with empty pockets and broken fences. The stage set, 1851, brought the heavy hitters in treaty-making, with President Fillmore dispatching Luke Lea as commissioner to join Ramsey in prying lands from Sioux grasp. Their mission targeted tribes along the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, coaxing cessions that would unlock millions of acres for the hungry republic. First up, the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux on the 23rd of July, where Wahpeton and Sisseton chiefs gathered under canvas, inking away vast holdings in Iowa and Minnesota up to the state's western line today. In return, they secured a reservation hugging the upper Minnesota River's western extremes, a strip averaging 10 miles per side, stretching from the Hawk River northward and Yellow Medicine southward, westward to Big Stone Lake and Lake Traverse Heads, spanning roughly 100 miles of what passed for security in those days. The document promised annuities to soften the blow, but whispers of trader debts already nibbled at the edges, turning supposed windfalls into mirages that evaporated before Sioux eyes. Lea and Ramsey painted it as progress, yet the chiefs signed amid pressures that felt less like choice and more like inevitability, their marks on paper sealing a retreat from ancestral expanses now eyed by plowmen. Not even 2 weeks later, August 5 saw the Treaty of Mendota unfold near the Mississippi's mouth, drawing Memdouakanton and Wapakute bands into the fold. Here, at a spot steeped in trading history, they relinquished all claims to lands in Iowa or Minnesota, a sweeping handover that stripped them of eastern strongholds where villages once thrived amid lakes and woods. Compensation came via another reservation, carved from the ceded turf, kicking off at the Little Rock River eastward, with a southern line darting from its mouth upstream westward to abut the Traverse des Sioux Reserve at Hawk and Yellow Medicine. This band of land, 10 miles wide per riverbank on average, clocked about 50 miles east to west along the Minnesota, a narrower haven that huddled families closer under government gaze. The chiefs, including figures like Little Crow's predecessors, navigated the talks with wary pragmatism, trading vast freedoms for structured aid, though the ink barely dried before discrepancies in payments sowed seeds of doubt, a bureaucratic sleight of hand that would fester into outright rage. These 1851 pacts didn't just redraw maps. They unleashed a torrent of change, extinguishing Sioux title across Minnesota save for those reserved pockets, a legal vanishing act that opened floodgates to white ambition. Annuity pots swelled to over $3 million, figures that dazzled on paper but often trickled down diminished by agents' cuts and traders' liens, leaving bands to ponder the math of betrayal. Ratification dragged to 1853, after which the Sioux uprooted to their new riverine homes, a migration laced with loss as old sites faded behind wagon trails. Upper Sioux, the Wahpeton and Sisseton, settled farther upstream in broader isolation, while lower counterparts, Memdouakanton and Wapakute, clustered nearer the agencies, their labels reflecting geography but masking shared grievances over shrinking worlds. On these reserves, infrastructure sprouted like reluctant concessions. Government warehouses stocked with sporadic supplies, agent quarters buzzing with oversight, mechanic shops treaty mandated for civilizing tools. Trader outposts dotted the landscape too, magnets for debt that annuity days amplified, as bands converged yearly for payouts and councils, rituals blending hope with hard bargaining. Yet this setup bred dependency, turning proud hunters into petitioners at doors controlled by outsiders, a system ripe for abuse where promises echoed hollow against empty larders. Immigration hit like a prairie fire, unmatched in Western annals, swamping ceded lands with seekers who conjured villages from vapor on Mississippi, Minnesota, and St. Croix banks. Prairies bloomed with log cabins, settlers' axes ringing where buffalo once roamed, a transformation so swift it bordered on sorcery, though the magic favored one side. Fort Ridgely rose as sentinel, planted near the Lower Sioux Reserve's eastern fringe, north of the river and 12 miles from the agency, its walls offering settlers an illusion of safety amid whispers of unrest. Troops there stood as buffers, yet encroachments crept in, a few bold claims staking Indian soil, testing boundaries that treaties drew but couldn't enforce, harbingers of conflicts where lines on maps met boots on ground. By 1858, the Sioux reservations had become pressure cookers of unmet expectations, where annuities arrived late and lands shrank under the gaze of encroaching settlers, a setup that begged for another round of negotiations laced with irony. That year, chiefs and band leaders, escorted by their agent Major Joseph R. Brown, journeyed to Washington, a pilgrimage blending diplomacy with the faint whiff of desperation. Amid marble halls far from prairie winds, they signed a new treaty that sliced away the northern half of their reserves, leaving only the southern banks along the Minnesota River as their domain. The government compensated per acre, a transaction that sounded fair on paper but felt like trading family heirlooms for pocket change, especially when funds funneled through agents who tallied every penny with the precision of suspicious bankers. This cession opened more acres to white homesteads, accelerating the frontier's churn, while the Sioux watched their buffer zones evaporate, a slow-motion eviction notice delivered with official seals. The treaty went beyond mere land swaps. It embedded a blueprint for civilizing the Sioux, a policy dressed in benevolence but rooted in erasure, aiming to mold hunters into farmers as if swapping bows for plows could rewrite centuries of tradition overnight. A dedicated fund, skimmed from annuity pools, financed improvements for those who severed tribal ties and embraced white customs, a severance package that promised progress but demanded cultural amputation. Individuals stepping forward received 80-acre allotments per household head, parcels carved from the remaining reserve, each equipped with essential farm structures, tools, and livestock to kickstart agrarian life. To incentivize the shift, participants earned wages for their labor and retained harvested crops, a system that dangled self-sufficiency like a carrot on a very long stick. Adoption surged. By the 1862 outbreak, around 160 Sioux had claimed these benefits, their farms dotting the landscape with fresh fences and hopeful furrows. Little Crow himself joined the ranks, tilling soil in a display of adaptation that masked deeper frustrations, while over 100 of these civilized farmers hailed from lower Sioux bands, many under his influence, turning reservations into patchwork experiments where teepees neighbored barns. Yet this push toward assimilation brewed internal storms, dividing bands into factions where resentment simmered like untended stew, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. The blanket Indians, those clinging to traditional ways wrapped in woolen symbols of resistance, chafed at diverting communal annuities to fund the civilization scheme, viewing it as theft from the collective pot to prop up a few traitors. Their bitterness echoed in councils, a major grievance that painted the policy as favoritism, not uplift, fostering rifts deeper than river canyons. Government efforts aimed to elevate these rude children of the plains toward white neighbors' standards, a gradual ascent believed to foster harmony, but obstacles abounded in the blanket Indians' seasonal helplessness and stubborn allegiance to the chase and warpath. When hunts faltered, they descended on kinfolks' farms, pitching lodges around sturdy houses and devouring stores until larders echoed empty, a parasitic cycle driven by survival's harsh math. In response, farmer families, stripped bare, abandoned homesteads to join the very hunts they sought to escape, leaving properties vulnerable to whims of the wanderers who then dismantled fences or pilfered what remained, acts born of necessity rather than malice but destructive all the same. Come spring, the cultivators returned to desolation, rebuilding amid discouragement that chipped at resolve, a loop that trapped progress in perpetual reset. This nomadic element's presence stalled the civilization system's serene operation among the Sioux, a persistent barrier to taming wild tribes, as experience grimly illustrated the futility of reforming the unyielding near those who adapted. The cruel twist lay in the aftermath. Many architects of the 1862 horrors emerged from these civilized ranks, their hands, once calloused from plows, now wielding tomahawks and torches against pioneer dwellings, proving that suits and citizenship garb concealed the same unquenched fury as blankets ever did, a dark punchline in the government's grand experiment. As the 1860s dawned, the Sioux reservations simmered with grievances that turned everyday hardships into flashpoints, where delayed annuities and lingering scars from past violence converged like storm clouds over the Minnesota prairies. The treaties of 1851 had dangled substantial sums. Traverse des Sioux promised $275,000 to Wapitan and Sisseton chiefs, plus $30,000 for improvements. Mendota offered $200,000 to Metawakanton and Wapakut leaders, with another $30,000 for enhancements, totaling $555,000 in pledges that sounded like lifelines but played out as cruel jokes. The Sioux insisted these funds never materialized fully, perhaps trickling into minor reservation upgrades while the bulk vanished into bureaucratic voids or trader ledgers, leaving families to scrape by on promises thinner than winter hides. Dissatisfaction echoed in councils soon after relocation, with agents fielding complaints that painted the government as a forgetful debtor, fostering a distrust that gnawed at communal bonds and amplified hunger during lean seasons. By 1857, the unrest drew official scrutiny when the Indian Affairs Department dispatched Major Kinsing Pritchett, a seasoned investigator, to probe the murmurs. His report captured the core. Complaints centered on unfulfilled treaty stipulations, eroding faith in Washington's word, erosion that couldn't be ignored without risking outright rupture. Chiefs voiced frustrations openly. Jagmani declared in council that the Traverse des Sioux sale entitled them to $50,000 annually for 50 years, plus a missing $300,000, while Cloudman, second in his band, questioned the absent $275,000 5 years into reservation life. Every white man aware, yet silent on its fate. These words weren't mere gripes. They highlighted a system where annuities arrived late or short, often diverted to settle debts with traders who inflated claims, turning what should have been sustenance into shackles that bound the Sioux to cycles of dependency and deprivation. Compounding this financial betrayal was the shadow of the 1857 Spirit Lake Massacre, a bloody affair that, though perpetrated by Inkpaduta's outlaw band, tainted the broader Sioux nation in American eyes. Exiled after murdering a Wapakut chief 2 decades prior, Inkpaduta roamed as a rogue. Yet U.S. troops and officials lumped his actions with the tribes, demanding accountability that fueled collective resentment. This misattribution lingered like a bad debt, irritating bands already strained by hunger, positioning the massacre as a precursor grievance that whispered of unchecked vengeance, a spark waiting for the annuity powder keg to ignite the 1862 outbreak in full fury. In the frostbitten fringes of 1857 Iowa, Inkpaduta's band lingered like a bad omen on the Sioux reservations, a rogue outfit untethered from tribal norms yet woven into their fabric through blood ties that complicated everything. Numbering 11 in his immediate circle during annuity seasons of 1855 and 1856, Inkpaduta claimed payouts near the Wapakut agency, tolerated out of fear rather than kinship, his past murder of Chief Tasagi 2 decades earlier, branding him an outcast who scavenged the upper Des Moines River through hunts and raids. His followers fluctuated, drawing kindred spirits from various Sioux bands, including distant Yanktons west of the James River, a fluid alliance built on shared defiance that blurred lines between outlaw and kin, setting the stage for actions that would echo blame across the nation. This wasn't a unified front but a patchwork of desperates, their existence a testament to fractures within Sioux society where exile didn't sever all connections, only sharpened the edges of survival. Tensions escalated through petty aggressions that snowballed into catastrophe, as Inkpaduta's group clashed with settlers whose encroachments mirrored broader frontier greed, a cycle of thefts and reprisals that left weapons confiscated and tempers raw. Disarmed briefly, they retrieved hidden rifles or scavenged others, descending on Spirit Lake settlements with demands for food that met meager offerings from earlier arrivals. When the full band, 12 men and 2 youths plus women, pressed further, denials sparked fury. Inkpaduta urged his eldest son to seize rather than beg, igniting a slaughter that began with 1 bullet and cascaded through cabins like dominoes in a blizzard. Families fell without warning, 40 in total across the lakeside homes, their ends marked by violations so extreme they defied parallels outside the Sioux's later 1862 uprising, A brutality born of accumulated slights where captives endured horrors that history records with averted eyes. 4 women dragged into captivity as trophies of a raid that stripped the area bare. From Spirit Lake, the killers pressed to Springfield at Pelican Lake's mouth, camping near traders William and Henry Wood's post on the Des Moines West Bank, bartering amid daily crossings to eastern settlements. Warnings of pursuing troops flipped the script. The brothers met swift deaths, their store looted and torched before the band crossed to assail the opposite shore, claiming 17 more lives in a tally that reached 47 souls erased in days. Settler gunfire finally repelled them, scattering the group into retreat, their path a trail of smoke and silence that amplified frontier fears. Among the captives, Mrs. Stevens and Mrs. Noble perished at Sioux hands, while Mrs. Marble and Miss Gardner found redemption through Wahpeton rescuers lured by government bounties, the deliverers pocketing $1,000 each in a transaction that underscored how even mercy carried a price tag in this fractured world. This massacre wasn't isolated savagery, but a ripple from deeper currents. Inkpaduta's band embodying the resentments of annuity shortfalls and land losses that plagued all Sioux, their outlaw status a convenient scapegoat for whites who painted the tribes with broad brushes of guilt. Repercussions lingered, fueling military pursuits that harassed innocent bands and deepened divisions. A prelude where one rogue's vengeance foreshadowed collective eruption. The event exposed the fragility of treaties, where individual acts ignited communal blame, turning reservations into tinderboxes waiting for the 1862 match. The Spirit Lake Massacre wasn't just blood on snow, it was a warning scrawled in settler fears, fueling Sioux resentments that boiled over in 1862. History shows how broken promises and rogue acts intertwined, turning frontiers into graveyards where neither side escaped unscathed. If this tale of vengeance hit hard, dive deeper next time. Subscribe, comment your thoughts, and stay for more unflinching truths.